What's up, guys? Mr. Dan here. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another Martial Arts Monday review. And welcome back to another Shawscope review. This time we're going back to Shawscope Volume 1 for 1978's The Crippled Avengers. This is a Venom mob film, meaning that it has the 5 principal actors known as the Venom mob who would appear in 11 films for director Chang-Chi. And there would be sort of a lot of ancillary films where some of those actors would appear as well, but there's 11 main Venom mob movies, and there's a great article on Screen Rant that sort of gives you a list of the movies and sort of a brief history of the whole Venom mob. In addition, of course, this being a Shawscope volume, there were excellent special features to go along with this and the next film that I'll review as far as the Venom mob movie goes. Not the next one on the channel. I'm going back to Thailand for next Monday, but after that, I'm going to be getting to Invincible Shaolin. Between those two films, there's plenty of special features, interviews with Robert Tai, who was one of the action choreographers, martial arts choreographers, and there's a great little documentary called Venom, Poison Clan Rocks the World, or Venom Clan, about the cultural impact and influence of the Venom mob films from director Chang-Chi. So this film is also known as Return of the 5 Deadly Venoms, which would lead you to assume that it must have came out after the 5 Deadly Venoms. That came out in August of '78. This one comes out in December, but upon doing further research, Shaw Brothers being Shaw Brothers and cranking out, a film every 2 months or less, Invincible Shaolin actually fit in there in between, and maybe even another film or two. I don't really know, but at any rate, this film is a highly significant film in the legacy of the Venom mob. It's the follow-up films, I think, that really established who the Venom mob were, considering that you might assume that each of the 5 deadly venoms, centipede, snake, lizard, etc., that those 5 actors consisted of the Venom mob. Well, one of them, Wei Pai, would actually be sidelined with a Tourette's syndrome diagnosis, which I didn't know. And despite appearing in future films, like next year's Last Hurrah for Chivalry, directed by John Woo, he would call it a career about 10 years after that. So he was sort of a semi-regular in some of the Venom mob movies. So not all of so 4 of the 5 actual Venoms can make up the Venom mob film. And I believe the other actor that doesn't is Chiang Shang, who was in 5 Deadly Venoms, okay? And you also find a lot of, like I said, a lot of actors who appear in some of the films in supporting roles, like Johnny Wang Lung Wei, who plays a character named Steward Wan in this, sort of the assistant to the bad guy, very recognizable actor. And I've probably even reviewed some of the Venom mob movies on the channel before. As a matter of fact, I've reviewed Chinatown Kid, so that qualifies as a Venom mob movie. I knew that Lo Meng was in it. I didn't realize they were all in it. And of course, some of these guys would go on to co-star in films such as Hard Boiled, where you would have Lo Meng and Philip Kwok appearing in that film. And of course, they would also make many independent films. Lo Meng would appear in, pull out my VHS tape here, Soul Brothers of Kung Fu with Bruce Lee, one of my favorite sort of independent Bruceploitation films. But anyway, let's get back to this. I'm not really going to match up names with characters because for the sake of time, considering it took me so long to set this up. But check out that article on Screen Rant if you're interested in the Venom mob. And wow, the special features were very interesting for sure. Essentially, what we have here is another film, as the alternate title, Avengers Handicapped, indicates, a film where you have handicapped heroes. This is not to be confused with Crippled Masters, by the way, which is thought of as more of an exploitation film, where you actually have some actors who were missing limbs and were teamed up. A guy with missing arms and a guy with missing legs teamed up to function as a unit, essentially. That one, for some people, is a little cringy. It may cross the line into exploitation. It depends on your opinion. I haven't seen that one in a while. And there's a scene from the film in the Shawscope Volume 1 book. And I had mentioned before that there's a very cool section of biographies in here of the stars that appear in the Shawscope Volume 1. But it's interesting because they don't have any of the individual Venom mob actors profiled, despite the fact that a few of them are in a number of films from Volume 1. And I think that's because we often think of them as like a unit rather than as individuals. Many of them certainly had long careers in and out of the Venom Mob films. Not all. Unfortunately, Shang Chang passed away from a heart attack at the age of 40, which is very sad. Far too young. But anyway, let's get onto the plot here. Essentially, we meet a warlord in the beginning who's kind of chilling out with his young son, and he's got a steward played by the Venom Mob, semi-regular Johnny Long Wei Wang, very recognizable face. I just talked about him a moment ago. And they're attacked by some enemies of theirs, and the wife is killed. The young son has his arms chopped off. It's a Chang-Chi film, so they go there, and he immediately sort of gets his revenge on these guys. Then we flash forward some years later. Now he's got streaks of white in his hair. His son has been fitted with these metal arms, which are really kind of badass looking, to be honest with you. They got like claws at the end and everything. They really did a good job on these. And now they've got about 20 or so relatives of the 3 killers that broke in and killed his wife and maimed his son. So he says, so now we're going to maim these guys. So you're thinking, wow, I kind of started off thinking you were going to be the good guy, the protagonist, and it seems like now you're taking your revenge a little bit too far. Well, he doesn't stop there, because he will maim sort of anybody that crosses him or bumps into him. In one case, literally, somebody bumps into him, and he decides that they chop his legs off immediately on the spot. Another guy kind of raises his voice. He is blinded, okay? And then, he is deafened, and then they pour something down his throat and make him a mute. So you have one guy with no legs, one guy who's a deaf mute, and then another guy is blinded. And then there's a local sort of, martial arts practitioner who's well regarded and has a master who's so outraged by this, he decides to just be so headstrong. He marches into the warlord's headquarters and challenges them to a fight. And his martial arts are very good, which is good because it helps the scene go on for a while, because he fights the son and the warlord. Or maybe the warlord, I forget, but also the steward, who has something called a meteor hammer, like a big metal ball on a chain. It's pretty cool. So that goes on for a while, but eventually, it's him against all those guys. They were able to restrain him and tie him up, and then they bring in a vice. They put it around his head, and they start squeezing it, and they essentially turn him into an idiot. And I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just trying to find the right words to describe a guy who's now senseless. So he almost becomes like a laughing, moron or idiot. But his martial arts are very good, right? So the other 3 guys are kind of hanging out in the blacksmith shop because they don't know what else to do, and they start to function a little bit as a unit, and then they kind of start to train under this master. And the idiot guy is sort of like the helper. The guy with no legs is fitted with like metal legs, and he's very awkward at first, but eventually he's moving just like he did with his actual legs, and he's got like pointy metal toes, so he can essentially kick right through you. The deaf guy, the deaf and mute guy, and the blind guy sort of train their other senses, and the training sequences in this are a big part of the film. They go on for a while. Not to the extent that some classics like The 18 Bronzemen and 36 Chambers of Shaolin feature the training sequences heavily. Like, that's like the point of the movie, actually, not the revenge part, if there is any, is like tacked on at the end. This has a long training sequence, very entertaining, by the way, and a very satisfying conclusion, because they're training the other senses. They've got these metal rings. There's a lot of metal rings in this film, and they're rolling them, and the blind guy is trying to listen to them and catch them. There's one scene. It's not the craziest stunt in the world, but he jumps way in the air, grabs this metal ring, and I'm just thinking, like, man, the timing of these guys. What if he misses? He's getting hit with a metal ring, and they're doing this on concrete or stone. I mean, these guys must have had, like, their skin probably didn't bruise. Like the way pro wrestlers, after a while, you just don't get bruised because you're hitting the ground so often. But really good training sequences. They have to use. They have to train the ears of the guy who is blind, so they have techniques to do that. And then the cool thing is when they finally confront the bad guys, there's a few confrontations. They develop some countermeasures for the 2 sensory impaired guys. They have noises they make, and then for the guy that can still see but is deaf and mute, they have kind of lights that they should reflect at him and confuse him, so they have to disable the countermeasures before they can actually fight the villains. And the artificial arms that the villain's son has, they have some surprises, so I won't mention all of them, but they can do things, and it's actually pretty cool. Very satisfying conclusion. Just great training sequences, great characters, great performances, great sets. I'm gonna guess most of these were probably indoor sets. You know, looks really good. Pretty cool to see Chen Quan Tai with the Venom Mob as the villain. And yeah, highly recommend this one. Really good follow-up to Five Deadly Venoms. You know, obviously, for those of us that saw this when we were younger or heard about it, we were probably expecting the mask to come back on because of the other title, Return of the Five Deadly Venoms. But don't worry about that. Just watch it for what it is and enjoy it for what it is. It's a very solid film. What are your thoughts about the Venom Mob? What are your thoughts about Crippled Masters? Let me know in the comments. Excuse me. What are your comments about Crippled Avengers? Let me know in the comments below. As I said, next week we're going back to another Tony Jaa film, and then we'll come back for some Shawscope reviews after that. Thanks.